Beyond the gates will reveal that some secrets do not explode with a deafening blast, but with a cold sensation that slowly seeps beneath the skin, quiet, deliberate, and so merciless that by the time people realize what is happening, everything they once believed in has already shattered without their even noticing. For Deanna, that moment does not come from an argument, from whispers circulating through Fairmont Crest, or from the pitying looks people cast at her family after Doug's death. It comes from a thin sheet of paper, from a few emotionless lines on a DNA report, from a truth so dry and stripped bare that it seems almost weightless, yet still heavy enough to crush every memory. Every ounce of faith, every thread of family love she had clung to for years. Deanna thought she had returned only to face the wreckage Doug left behind, to confront Vanessa, to force her mother to finally call their mistakes by their true names. The very mistakes that had torn the family apart. But Deanna never imagined that amid all those terrible things, the cruelest truth of all would lie buried deepest, in the place no one could see. Inside a secret that had been hidden for so long it had begun to smell like betrayal. The test results show that Donnell is not Doug's biological son. That single conclusion is enough to knock Deanna's entire world off its axis. Donnell, the brother she had always trusted without hesitation, suddenly becomes the center of a horrifying question mark. Doug, the father who died carrying too many mistakes and too much unfinished love, suddenly becomes a man who may have spent his entire life beside a child who did not share his blood. And Vanessa, the woman who has always demanded the right to be forgiven for the pain she endured, may in fact be the one who planted the seed of this lie years ago and let it grow right there in the living room, at every family dinner, in every embrace that once felt sacred. Deanna can no longer look at Donnell the way she used to, not because she hates him, but because every time she looks at him now, she sees a crack spreading across the face of the entire family. Until now, Donnell had always been the one who preserved the last decent part of a household long accustomed to chaos. He was the one who stood between Vanessa's rage and Doug's darkness, the one who tried to mend things when everything tilted off course, the one who believed that if anyone still had enough patience, this family could still be saved. But now, his very existence has become living proof of a secret no one dares touch. What drives Deanna to despair is not only the possibility that Doug is not Donnell's biological father, but the thought that if it is true, then their entire childhood was built on a stage where the adults performed their roles far too well. So many family photographs, so many holidays, so many times Doug laid a hand on Donnell's shoulder as if passing down the pride of the family line. All of it now suddenly feels unbearably fragile. Deanna begins to wonder what, if anything, in that house was ever real. Was Doug's love for Donnell genuine, or merely the duty of a man who discovered he had been betrayed and chose to stay? Was Donnell's bond with Doug real, or simply the result of a performance that lasted so long even the people inside it forgot where the lie had begun? But the truth in a story like this never has only one layer. And Deanna knows all too well that a DNA report is not enough to close the matter. Her greatest fear quickly turns into suspicion. Are the results truly accurate, or has someone tampered with them? Fairmont Crest has never lacked hands willing to alter reality in service of power, money, revenge, or control. If Doug died amid mysteries still not fully explained, if Vanessa is entangled in dangerous relationships, if this family is surrounded by people who know how to turn secrets into weapons, then why could a DNA result not be manipulated as well? The more Deanna thinks about it, the more chilled she becomes. It is possible that someone wants to throw a bomb into the heart of the McBride family at the very moment they are weakest. It is possible that someone knows Donnell is the last emotional pillar holding them together, and that simply shaking his identity would be enough to make every remaining bond collapse. There is also a crueler, more terrifying possibility that the result is entirely accurate, and that the world is simply brutal enough not to need any further conspiracy at all. From that moment on, Deanna is torn between two opposing instincts. One part of her wants to protect Donnell at any cost, to hide the results away, to stop any wave that could drag him into an identity crisis he does not deserve to bear. But another part of her, the part sharpened by grief, anger, and the crushing sense of being betrayed for far too long, wants to drag everything into the light. She wants Vanessa to look into her eyes and confess. She wants the house to tremble under the weight of questions no one has been allowed to ask for years. She wants Doug, even in death, to stop being protected by easy sanctification. If he knew and still remained silent, was that silence a sacrifice or an act of cowardice? If he did not know, was he a tragic victim or a man so addicted to the illusion of family that he could not bear to face the truth? Deanna cannot decide which possibility hurts more, because in either case, she must accept that the adults in her life chose silence instead of honesty, and that the price of that choice is now falling squarely on the children. Vanessa now becomes the center of the storm, not because she is the only one who may know the truth, but because she is the only one with nowhere left to run. In the beginning, Vanessa tries to maintain the composure of a woman who has survived too many tempests to break easily. She understands the value of controlling her expression, knows how to use silence like a wall, knows how to make others doubt their own instincts. But Deanna is no longer simply a grieving daughter who has come home in pain. Now she has become the embodiment of everything Vanessa buried. Every glance from Deanna feels like a blade, reminding Vanessa that the greatest secret of her life is no longer lying quietly underground. She knows that a single crack is all it will take for everything to collapse. Even worse, she knows that if she confesses, she will not only lose Donnell and Deanna, she will also lose the power to tell the story of Doug in a way that serves her. For years, Doug, however broken, however burdened by his own sins, still remained a symbol of fatherhood in the eyes of the children. If the truth comes out that Donnell was not his biological son, then every memory of Doug will be placed on the table for dissection. His love will be scrutinized, his motives questioned, his pain laid bare. Vanessa understands that, and that is why she fears confession not only for her own sake, but because once that door opens, no one will be able to control where the storm goes next. The cruelest question hangs over all of them. Did Doug ever know the truth before he died? The answer could turn him into a great man, or into a man so wounded he chose to live inside a role of his own making. Perhaps Doug discovered it long ago but said nothing because he did not want to shatter Donnell's childhood. Perhaps he understood that a father is not only the man who gives blood, but the one who stays when the ugliest truths come to light. Perhaps he looked at Donnell and decided that his love for that boy was strong enough to survive betrayal. But perhaps the truth is darker than that. Perhaps Doug found out too late, when his life had already slipped into debt, gambling, despair, and ties of guilt he could no longer untangle. Perhaps he remained silent not out of nobility, but because he no longer had the strength to destroy one more thing. A man who has lost too much in life will sometimes cling to one final lie, not to save anyone else, but simply to save the last dying fragment of his own humanity. That is why this truth has the power not only to kill the memory of Doug, but also to make his love seem even greater in a way more painful than anyone wants to admit. While Deanna is tormented between the urge to protect and the urge to destroy, Donnell still does not know that the ground beneath his feet is splitting apart. He is still trying to do the one thing he has always done in life, keep his family from falling into the abyss. After Doug's death, after the shocks Vanessa has caused, after the tangled relationships and the shadows of power circling around them, Donnell still believes that what matters most is not another war, but a reason for everyone to stay together. That very belief is what hurts Deanna most, because she understands that if the truth reaches Donnell, he will not only suffer from learning that he is not Doug's biological son. He will suffer because he will realize that he spent his entire life loving through a name that may never have truly belonged to him. He will have to ask himself who he is, who he belongs to, why no one thought he had the right to know sooner. And worst of all, he will have to live with a question that may never have a satisfying answer. Were all the people he loved silent because they wanted to protect him? or because they never considered him important enough to deserve the truth. And this is where the scheme and the struggle begin tightening around each character's throat. Deanna secretly goes through Doug's old files, searching inside locked drawers, forgotten cardboard boxes, and objects that seemed harmless but in fact contain an entire sealed history. The deeper she digs, the more she realizes there are gaps in the family timeline that cannot be explained. There was a stretch of time when Vanessa disappeared from Doug's reach much longer than anyone ever believed. There are hospital bills, trips, and unfamiliar names in an old contact book that make Deanna's blood run cold. Every fragment she uncovers does not soothe her, but only feeds the obsession. Because if Donnell's biological father is still alive, then who is he? A mistake from the past, a love Vanessa never truly forgot? Or a name so dangerous it had to be buried for a lifetime? And if Vanessa's betrayal back then was not driven by love at all, but by pressure, by fear, by coercion, by manipulation, then the entire story changes color. Deanna hates that she even has to consider the possibility of pitying her mother because her anger needs a clearly guilty person. But life has never been that kind. It always forces people to suffer in the gray areas. When Vanessa finally senses that Deanna knows too much, she enters a fight for survival stripped of its usual glamour. She must no longer only hide the past, but decide what is more worth saving, her own dignity, Doug's memory, or Donnell's soul. She knows all too well that one confession could free her from the burden of so many years, but it would also burn down every remaining bond she still has with her children. She can continue lying, continue pointing to the instability of the DNA result, continue planting suspicion that someone is manipulating their family. That would be the easier path, the more familiar one, and also the filthier one. But confession would not make her a good person either. It would only make her the last one forced to pay the price. And perhaps what terrifies Vanessa most is the knowledge that Donnell may be able to forgive Doug, may even be able to forgive fate itself, but may never forgive the mother who watched him grow day by day and still chose silence. If one day Donnell learns that he is not Doug's son, his reaction will likely not be immediate collapse, but something deeper, quieter, like a room suddenly drained of air. Donnell is not the type to begin by smashing everything in sight. He will probably stand frozen before a mirror and, for the first time, fail to recognize his own face. He will look back on every memory with Doug, every embrace, every lesson, every disagreement and reconciliation, and ask whether Doug loved him as a son or as a living reminder of betrayal. Yet from that very shock, Donnell could also become the strongest person in the story. He might choose to search for his biological father, not because he longs for a new family, but because he needs to return a name to the truth stolen from him. But that would not be a beautiful journey. Finding his biological father would not mean accepting him. Some men deserve to remain in the past and do not deserve to step into the present. If Donnell's biological father turns out to be a coward who ran away, or worse, a dangerous ghost who once ruined Vanessa and vanished, then discovering him would only wound Donnell even more. In that case, Doug, though not tied by blood, would become even more clearly the only father who ever truly mattered. And it is here that the tragedy reaches its deepest layer. The truth may not destroy Doug's memory the way Deanna fears. It may do the opposite. It may transform Doug from a flawed man into the most painful image of chosen love, a father who did not need blood to stay. A man burdened by debt, by ruin, even by failure, who still held onto a child as his own because his love was greater than his pride. If Doug knew, then his silence was no longer merely silence. It was a decision that slowly cost him pieces of himself, yet preserved Donnell's childhood. That is the kind of truth that might even make Deanna, suffocating in rage, hesitate. Because if Doug knew and still loved Donnell without condition, then the betrayer was never Donnell, and it was never the mismatch of blood either. The real betrayer was fear, The fear that made the adults choose silence instead of believing that children have the right to know who they are. In the end, the greatest question is not who Donnell's biological father is, but who still has the strength to hold this family together once the truth explodes. Deanna may be the one holding the bomb. Vanessa may be the one who lit the fuse years ago. Doug may be the one who tried to shield a disaster with love. But Donnell may be the one standing in the ashes, deciding whether this place is still worthy of being called family. Perhaps he will be the only one who still wants to preserve what remains, not because he is cowardly or too gentle, but because he understands what real loss is. A man who has just lost his father will understand better than anyone that not every truth brings relief. Some truths only leave us more alone. But there are also truths that, once finally called by their real names, give people the chance to live without pretending anymore. Donnell may search for his biological father. He may also reject that man if he realizes that blood alone is not enough to build belonging. He may hate Vanessa, may even never forgive her. But very likely, he will be the first person to understand Doug in the deepest way, that being a father has never been only about biology, but about choosing to stay when there are 1,000 reasons to walk away. And that is the deepest cut of this entire tragedy. Because when the storm passes, when the papers have been opened, when the tears have dried, and when the confessions can no longer be taken back, what remains may not be an intact family, but a family standing naked before itself for the first time. Deanna will have to live with the truth that she was the one who forced the final door open. Vanessa will have to face the consequences of all those silent years. And Donnell will have to choose between blood and memory, between anger and gratitude, between the right to hate and the need to belong. In the world of Beyond the Gates, that is the perfect material for a war in which no one truly wins. Because every answer brings another loss, every secret exposed opens a new wound. Yet it is precisely within that pain that real love finally reveals itself. Not clean, not ideal, not radiant, but twisted, flawed, stained with blood and tears, and still real enough that no one can turn away from it. And if there is one thing that makes this story more haunting than anything else, it is the possibility that Donnell, the one who was robbed of the truth his entire life, may be the last person left with enough love to save the very people who hurt him most.